In terms of budget cap, now obviously, like you said, the 2021 regulations have now been moved a year. And I think that there's even a possibility that they really just keep this year's car for next year as well. Maybe add a few tweaks to it, but this year's car would basically be 2021's car as well, just so teams like Williams can save on parts and everything for the rule change in 2022. So it looks like that like next year's car would basically be the same. But in terms of the budget cap, now this has been talked about for ages now, and is still set to be introduced for next year. And even though what's going on with the current regulations, teams like McLaren and teams like Ferrari have different opinions on where they think the budget cap should be. Now, obviously, that's going to happen because McLaren are still in that. As much as we love McLaren, they're still in that position of being a mid-table team, and obviously Ferrari are in that top three, trying to get podiums, trying to get wins, trying to get to the championship. So in terms of the budget cap, it was announced that every team would be the same. But obviously, Ferrari are complaining that they supply engines and parts and whatever to like teams like Haas, Alfa Romeo, and things like that. So the money it takes to make engines not just for yourself but for other teams is more in terms of the budget that you're eating out of. So they think it's going to be worse for them. If that makes sense. How would you sort of sum up the terms of the budget cap, and would you make it sort of that all teams have the same, or it's different for where you are in terms of performance or what you do to supply other teams? Or
I mean, I always believe in everyone should have the same, because no one should have an advantage really in any sport or any competition. You want to have it where it all starts out where everything is the same, and then you see who does the best with what they get given. Ferrari complain all the time, though.
Yeah,
it's nothing new, is it? I mean, they complain all the time about anything. How many times have they done a stunt of literally saying, "Oh, we'll quit the sport if you don't make these changes," and then it's like 20 years later, "Oh, you're still here? Hello."
Because we're going to quit again.
Yeah, exactly. F1 is valuable. It's too valuable for a team like Ferrari. If they left, then F1 is nowhere near the same. So. I think I can understand what they're trying to say, because, as you say, they provide stuff. But again, Mercedes, are they complaining? They provide.
They haven't said anything.
Well, I mean, they've probably. I don't know. I mean, look, they don't. What I've noticed with Mercedes and Ferrari is Mercedes get on with it. Ferrari always have a reason to have an excuse, and that's because they're not winning all the time, while Mercedes are. It could happen the other way around if Mercedes swapped with Ferrari, maybe, but. Yeah. I think Ferrari should just get on with it. I understand what they're trying to say, but we hear about things in the past where Bernie Ecclestone, had stuff to do with Ferrari, where Ferrari would get the most money from all, of all the teams, out of all the teams, because they're so valuable to the sport. Understandable, but we want to see some leveled budgets here. So I don't really understand what they're trying to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, just while you were speaking about that, because obviously it's supplying other teams. For next year, we'd have Ferrari obviously supplying engines, Mercedes would supply engines, Honda would do Red Bull and Toro Rosso. Renault would only just do themselves because the deal for McLaren and Mercedes is still going ahead for next year, I think.
I think it is,
so
yeah.
No matter what happens this year, McLaren are still going to have Mercedes engines for 2021. And then that would just leave, I think, Racing Point, which would be Aston Martin. But would Aston Martin be supplying the engines, or would Mercedes still be supplying the engines? That's the one I'm not too sure about.
What, with McLaren, sorry, or
Racing Point, obviously, with Lawrence Stroll, buying Aston Martin. Next year they're going to be called Aston Martin Racing for Formula One. So would that mean that Aston Martin make their own engines, or would Mercedes still be putting them in?
I guess it depends on, maybe because it's their first year, they stick with Mercedes.
Yeah.
Because it's the building times for the team, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe that hasn't been decided yet. So, to be honest, you're asking me where I have no idea.
No, because I was just thinking, because wouldn't that mean that Mercedes is probably still supplying the most engines? So surely it would be Mercedes that are moaning, which sort of just sums up your point.
Well, I mean, it's weird because Aston Martin got affiliated with F1 with Red Bull, didn't they? They came back 1 or 2 years ago. So they clearly made sure they got back in and then looked for opportunities. They went to Racing Point and obviously bought them out. So, well, no, sorry, it was the other way around. Lawrence Stroll bought them to come here. So I'm wondering if maybe Aston Martin have now got an engine ready, maybe, because they've been there for a few years. But that's, again, I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago they were looking at maybe if like Renault and Red Bull didn't work out, they could become it. But obviously the Honda situation came in, and obviously Honda became that. And I think Aston Martin were a possibility for next year, but obviously with Honda doing so well, that Red Bull obviously didn't want to remove that, because obviously they got race wins with Honda, which was sort of an achievement for both parties. So I think in terms of the Aston Martin thing, it just sort of became a back burner, and they were a sponsor. And then obviously with Mr. Stroll buying everything, Mr. Stroll decided to obviously move them to Racing Point. But that's the only one that I'm not sure about. But I think that would still mean that Mercedes do supply the most engines for the F1 grid. So yeah, I mean, if anyone was going to moan, but just in terms of what Zach Brown said, he said, I think it'll be great for F1 to have more competitive racing. We'll obviously see more fans coming out, whether that be at the actual event or people watching at home. Then sponsors, more countries will want to host racing if it's more competitive, more equal. We're seeing better racing. He's making completely, great points. Matthew Bonotto says, agrees costs need to be looked at, but questions whether it's fair for all teams to be on same budget. Saying teams like Ferrari supply, produce parts for the teams, therefore costs will be higher than customer teams. Common ground is what suits everybody, but would a single budget cap be the answer? But in terms of what you said, obviously we want to see the most teams, on the competitive budgets, because we want to see the teams like Williams not like 2 laps down on a race.
No.
I mean, the point? What's the point?
I just want it to be in look, I just want it to be with racing where I don't know if it'll ever happen again, but as a fan speaking now, I want it to be close. I want it to be looking back at the race results throughout the year, that it was a different driver or a different team winning each time. When was
that? What was that season? Was it 2012? What was the season when it was the first 5 races or whatever it was?
First seven
races. Yeah, that's how good it was.
And it then changed a little bit after that, but even so, actually later on, Raikkonen would win in Abu Dhabi, and then that would end up being 8 different races. I think that was the first time ever as well in F1. So we need that back. I think that's all that's missing with F1. The competition just needs to be back, and that's the problem we've had over the last few years, where the smaller teams don't get a great slice of their cake. Really, they get a smaller slice, and it's not happening for them, and they're having to get that each year. So I completely agree with the same budget cap, and this is why Ross Brawn being in the decider for this is great. He knows how to run an F1 team. He knows how to win. He knows how to actually get from Honda to Brawn winning championships. Who can forget? So
and also, I don't want to sort of butt in, but he knows Ferrari as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't underestimate his expertise in the world of F1. So for me, I look at it as that, where Ross Brawn has made some good decisions so far. And he's doing it now with all this. He would definitely have had a say in this. And he said, I want this back into a competitive market. And it's happening slowly in terms of the future. It's happening. Might not happen until 2022, but it's happening. It's around the corner. It's not the whole questions of when is it going to come back? Because it's happening.
Yeah, and in terms of like F1 in general, I know like obviously a lot of people. I saw a video the other day. I don't know if it was a video or an article where they were like, bring sort of Bernie Ecclestone's era back, and I was thinking no, because as much as I liked Ecclestone as sort of a character, how his interviews were just so random, but in terms of what F1 have sort of done since then, the sort of whole social media, using the YouTube, using all them sort of platforms, they've become a bigger brand because of it. And they've sort of expanded the people that watch it. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are. I watched the last one. Doesn't really bother me that much. I'd rather play it, but sort of the esports that's going on right now, because obviously there isn't racing going on. As much as I'm maybe not enjoying it, it wasn't that good. But other people who are really into the sort of their gaming and seeing the drivers on that racing thing, it's probably really good for them. But at least they're doing something in this time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Bernie would have even looked into that at all if he was still there. I mean, people keep saying bring Bernie Ecclestone back. What, for 2 seconds? He'll be dead in a few days. Leave the guy alone. I mean, Bernie Ecclestone is a legend in F1.
Yeah,
He's the man that put it on the map. But
yeah,
then at some point you've got to pass the hurdle you've got to pass the bat to someone else, haven't you? And someone's
yeah,
got to do that. For me, Chase Carey is fantastic. Me and my dad watched him interviewed on TV last year or the year before when he was interviewed about the future of F1. Me and my dad were convinced. We thought, yeah, he knows what he signed up to. He's clearly not going in with his eyes closed. He knows what to expect. So for me, we're in the we had to move on because, as you say, social media was not even a thing while Bernie was around. He was living 20, 30 years ago still. He
yeah.
was probably still using landline to contact his people.
Facts.
Yeah, exactly. He will get the facts in saying, "Oh, Hamilton won today's race. The race is out there, Bernie." I know, but the facts are amazing. You could have just texted us. What's text? So
I'll use
yeah.
teletext.
See facts. I just want a teletext holiday. Where you going? Bahrain. Yes.
Woo!
So for me, I think they're going in the right direction. As you say, you said it's spot on about the esports. They're looking at ways of keeping everyone entertained and the fans as well. As you said, Zach Brown even said, with the words of, even more fans are starting to watch on the TV and at the race circuit. So it is like a festival in some of these races now. It's not just the race itself; it's what's happening around the track, which is fantastic entertainment here, there, everywhere. And
Yeah.
also, Bernie Ecclestone, as you say, how random he was. I remember a video I saw on YouTube a few weeks back, and it was in 2013 at the British Grand Prix, and I think it was Susie Perry and Eddie Jordan asking about the future Grand Prix for next year. And Bernie pretty much said, "Oh, New Jersey's happening for next year. Still waiting for it, Bernie. Haven't seen a New Jersey race yet." He said it was pretty much done and dusted, signed. And then he kept saying the British Grand Prix hasn't been agreed yet. And then Eddie Jordan goes, "We've seen the contract. You told me. You've signed it. Just tell the people." It was so funny. That's just how daft he got. But again, we love Bernie. But sadly, I think people who say bring back the Bernie era, yeah, but no.
No, but I have to say congratulations to Bernie because isn't he becoming a father again?
What?
Yeah, I think
How old
so.
is he?
Congratulations, Bernie Ecclestone. I mean, he's a bit like Ronnie Wood, really, in terms of just doing it when you're older.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just going to enjoy the era when I'm like young and fit, and then I'll just have a kid when I'm like 70 or something. He's what?
He's 89.
I'm sure he is, isn't he? Is it on the news? Like when you're
Yeah, no,
googling
you're
it?
right. Bernie
Yeah.
Ecclestone has amazing energy as he prepares to be a dad again. Oh my god. Oh no, what? I don't know.
Congratulations, Mr. Ecclestone.
Well, actually,
Congratulations.
funny enough, Ecclestone, according to Auto Week, he told them that he reckons the F1 season this year should be cancelled completely anyway. So that's
Oh, that's
interesting.
because he's not in it. So.
Yeah, he doesn't get his share. But yeah, I mean that's crazy. But as you say, Ronnie Wood, he loved it. Freddy Krueger and all. Who's Freddy
Freddy
Krueger?
Krueger.
That's a horror villain. If anything, he kills people. Why did that name come? I meant
Good
Mick
luck to him
Jagger.
as well.
I
Jagger.
meant Mick Jagger. But yeah, I didn't know that. That does not surprise me actually.
Yeah, classic. So that sort of rounds this podcast up in terms of what we're going to talk about. For the next time we do this, Jamie, what I want you to do is find the 8 races of the whatever the hell is it? Was it 21, 22 races that were to be this year?
Yes.
Can you find 8 maximum that you would choose for a F1 race? And then maybe what we could do is ones that have been cancelled before. Maybe we could say races that we'd love to bring back as well. Turkey's definitely up there. Like I remember when I used to play that game on the games console, that was my favorite track. So to lose that was
2010.
absolutely gutting to lose that race. That was a really good one. But yeah, definitely for sure we'll both write them down and try and find the sort of the races that we would definitely have for sort of an F1 grid. But how amazing would it be to have a 8 race championship season anyone could win it. And like we said at the start of this podcast, that would be absolutely fantastic. So actually, Ross Brawn, if you're listening to this podcast, I don't know how, but if you are listening to this, just do 8 races. Just do 8 races this
And
season.
subscribe.
Let's just see what happens. And of course, subscribe. Yeah. So Jamie, I obviously can't wait to do this again. But thank you very much for being on this podcast. And we'll definitely discuss more for future podcasts as well. But yeah, thank you very much.